Hello. Hello.
All right, here we go. Confidence Conversations with Idara, and we are having a conversation today, again, with Ramat Oyetunji. Ramat, thank you so much for coming back to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Idara. Happy to be back.
Awesome. So, you and I know the impetus for this conversation. We've talked a lot about finances, financial wellness, as we often refer to it, and just this notion of how being certain and knowing what to do with your finances plays a big role in feeling confident overall. So, a lot of times I'm talking about rebuilding confidence in the workplace and all of the things that help to feel confident around work in general. Of course, we're the same person whether we're at work and personal, and it also has to do with just how confident you're feeling in general. One of the things we teased out was you can be an expert in your area. You can be great at what you do at work and not necessarily as informed, equipped, or confident as would be ideal in the area of finances. Some of our earliest conversations, it was like you were educating me in what seemed like the very basics. But having this sort of awareness and certainty not only helps you to feel more comfortable, but it better informs decisions, whether it's career transition, it's time to consider a new role, you want to stay, but you're thinking about retirement. So all of that has led to multiple conversations and giving us this opportunity basically to capture this one and talk about a lot more about financial wellness and how that essentially how to set yourself up successfully in that arena.
Yes, and I think you touched on all the important points and all the things that led up to us having this conversation today. Financial wellness, I think it's a word that has been kind of like thrown around a lot recently. And as people talk about all sorts of like overall well-being, mental health, career health, and your physical health as well, people have been talking about financial wellness too, because it's also a very important part of our whole being, right? And I think one of the things we talked about was how do you even define financial wellness, right? And I want to say that there is no real definition because it depends on each person, you know. But one of the things that I have found from talking to people, working with people, and from my own personal experience as well, is that financial wellness really doesn't associate with like a dollar figure. And it's more about the confidence that you have in your finances. That confidence that, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm making the right decisions. I know I'm on track. And I know enough to get me to where I want to be. And that's how I define financial wellness. And that's how I explain financial wellness to the people I talk to, the people I work with, is it's how can I help you feel confident about your finances? So it doesn't mean that you have to have everything figured out, everything lined up. It doesn't mean that you have to have achieved a certain savings account number or anything like that. It's more about having that confidence that, yep, I know what I'm doing with my finances. I have enough information and knowledge to make informed decisions. And I know that I can get to where I want to get to.
Thank you so much for that, for elaborating on that. Some of the words that we've talked about in these multiple conversations around finance was security, confidence, clarity, and control. Control, not as much, but it's more so that sense of what you described. I know what I need to do, not necessarily a dollar sign. I would say, having launched the Antorch Group, I've been a lot more sensitive to that. There's the income on the business side, but then there's what I'm able to get on as a personal, and that changed from being employed and getting a paycheck to being an entrepreneur and launching the Antorch Group, and which was one of the first meetings that I had was with you to talk about these aspects. And it wasn't so much about how much I had or how much was coming in at the time. Those were still variables, but the knowing what to look at, where there were opportunities to plan. So in some ways, in that time frame, I was talking about here's where I am now, and this is where I think I want to be, and then having that conversation with you, starting with where I am now, which I assume is also how it starts with all of your clients.
Absolutely. Yes. When people come to me, it's usually because they're like, hey, I'm here and I'm wondering if this is where I should be, if I'm on the right track. This is where I think I want to get to, just like you said.
Right.
You have like an idea in your mind, like, I think this is where I want to go. And so helping get that clarity that, all right, let's flesh out where usually people know where they are already. It's more like, hey, where do I want to go and how do I get there? Am I already doing all the right things? Or should I be doing more? Do I need to learn more? And so when people come, you're right, they usually come with, I know I'm here. I know what my current situation is. The question is like, how do I get to this next level? Or how do I get to where I want to be?
And I wanted to say on the other end of it, but I would say, even speaking for myself, it really is a journey. It continues to evolve. And since essentially we're often starting from what we know, which part of my surprise was learning what I didn't know. There's certain terms that you hear fairly regularly, and then you realize that if you've not delved into it, you don't necessarily have the correct definition for the word or the category. You once did a webinar where you were talking about IRAs and a few other things, and there was what I'd associated with it in the context of, when I'm working, this is the amount that I'm putting away towards this and maximizing and so on. But until I sat down and sort of delved into it, I didn't realize how much more there was to learn. I'm curious to know, actually, there may or may not be a pattern with this. What is it that you find surprises people the most when you start to talk about all the different aspects of their finances that there is to consider?
Oh, that's a great question. So almost every client leaves with some kind of like aha moment, right? I have had some clients who really did have all their ducks in a row, and I was like, hey, you don't need me, you're doing great, right? But a lot of my clients, some of them, it's not even realizing, and this one is kind of like the most surprising to me, but I'm finding that it's actually quite common, is they don't realize where all their money is going. So many people kind of have it in their minds, like they have their budget kind of like running in their heads, but they don't actually sit down to say like, hey, where exactly is the money going? And so when I have that first session and we're kind of like saying like, hey, where's your money going? What's coming in? What's going out? And they kind of like put everything that they normally have running in their head down on paper. I'm like, hey, this looks great. Then I start asking them other questions like, hey, I thought I heard you say you did XYZ, but I don't see that here. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. And then we start adding it up, and it's always a surprise to them that they're spending more than they think they are. So there's always that surprise. And then I like how you mentioned not knowing what you don't know. So a lot of people are very familiar kind of with the basics. Like, hey, if I join a company, I join the 401k plan, like I contribute to that. But a lot of people kind of have that sense, I mean, good and bad, but good that they have that sense of like, hey, I should at least contribute to get the company match, right? Because contrary to what people think that it's free money, it's not. It's actually part of your compensation. So if you don't get that money, it's like you're giving your company your salary, right? And we don't want that. So a lot of people at least know to do that, which is great. But then a lot of people just have that notion that, well, if I contribute 10%, I'll be fine. And that stemmed from like the 2000s where, then they said, hey, contribute 10% and you should be okay. But things have changed since. So it's always a surprise to people when I tell them that contributing 10% might not be enough for you to hit retirement. So there's some people who come in thinking that, hey, I'm doing great, I'm on track. And then they've discovered that, wow, they need to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that they're here to learn that, and they're open to learning it. So it's
Yeah.
always been positive.
One of the things I wanted us to touch on is this notion of writing down, but I'll tell you one of my aha moments. I had multiple, but one of my aha moments was how I perceived the intention and meaning of the word net worth, or the phrase net worth. Oftentimes you've seen in media or pretty much wherever it was I heard net worth, I always associated with multi-millionaires, people who were already wealthy, and I thought this is how you assess the wealth of the already wealthy. That was my initial impression. It's been years since I had that impression, but here I am, comfortable, informed, confident, educated, all of that. And it was so interesting to me when we sat down and looked at it to realize I hadn't thought all these years and working and making money, being comfortable financially, I hadn't thought about it in terms of net worth. There were other terms, assets, and all of these other things that I'd heard, but I had not strictly thought of it in terms of my net worth.
Right.
The other thing that I wanted to just talk about was, and this came up also in we had a group of us that went through these 10 steps that you were doing, but it started with knowing where you're spending money. Let's just talk a little bit more about that power of writing it down.
Yes. That's the first thing that I do when I meet with people. It's even as they're talking to me, I'm writing it down, because at the end of our session, I'm going to give it to them. And I tell them that it's so important to take the time to kind of just write it all down. Once you see it in black and white, it comes out of your head as this kind of like vague thing, and it becomes concrete, and once it's out there, that it starts to take a shape, and then you can mold it, you can do something with it, versus when it's vague. And so writing it down is such a first step. And I try to tell people, because honestly, we know that money isn't just about dollars and cents. There's a lot of emotion tied to money. There's a lot of all sorts of other things tied with money, right? And sometimes people don't want to write things down. They don't want to see it because they're afraid of what they'll see, right? And I tell them, like, it's okay if you don't know what to do next. It's okay if it's not exactly what you were hoping for, or maybe it's okay if it's just as you feared, right? But putting it down there at least takes that kind of black box thinking away. It's no longer some secret, it's now there. And then you can start to figure out what to do. But there is power in writing. I've been, as you know, I've been reading a lot on like the stats of goal setting and the likelihood of achieving your goals when you write them down. And the likelihood of achieving your goals is 65% when you write it down, put some actions to it, and share it with someone. So even just telling a friend or your sibling, or maybe like someone else who's also on the same journey, right? Like, hey, this is my goal, and I have these 1, 2, 3 steps that I'm going to do. That's already powerful. And already increases your likelihood of success. So writing it down is such an important first step. And it gives you confidence too. Like, because now it's no longer something that you're afraid of. You've kind of like empowered yourself really by writing it down.
It's not this nebulous, daunting thing. And sometimes just simply it not being this forgotten thing, because when you have income coming in regularly, it sometimes masks that there is a better habit that you can form about what you're doing, or that it's still important to know where your money is going. That in itself can be very enlightening. And one of the things that I like about a lot of the tools we use now, credit card statements, for example, if you have credit cards, bank statements, is that they also will categorize your expenses. It's not the same as teasing it out, writing it down, actually knowing for yourself where the money is going. But there are some tools to help you with it. And the tools to put the information together, the writing it down, knowing to find an accountability partner that works for you. Sometimes accountability goes a long way, or just that sense of ownership because you've said it out loud. All of this kind of contributes to that knowledge component. And like you said, it's not a dollar amount, but the knowing, because it may be that the amount that you have coming in, the amount that you have, the amount that you're spending is fluctuating, but there is something to be said for that certainty that now I know what
Yes.
I need to do. Now I know where there are levers to pull, where I can pull back, where I
Yes.
can increase, and so on, which I'm sure you've seen as well. Did you want to elaborate on that? That
Yes.
knowing component?
Yes. All right. So one of my clients that I worked with, she she really came in thinking like, hey, I need to gain clarity on where my money is going and what I'm doing with my plans, like if I'm on the right track, right? And so we followed the process, starting with, hey, where are you now? What are your expenses? All of that. She was not living like extravagantly at all, right? Like she was like living pretty reasonably, but her expenses were more than what she was bringing in. So once we recognized that, she realized that she had to increase her income. So there are always two levers you can pull, right? Like your income or your expenses. And a lot of people focus on cutting down and cutting back on expenses. But I encourage people to also look at increasing their income, right? Like I said, she wasn't living extravagantly, and we all deserve to at least live in some kind of like nice way, right? And so once she realized that, she started looking for jobs. Now, there were internal positions, but knowing what her income had to be informed her in the kind of roles she was looking for and the kind of salary she asked for.
Yeah.
So now, without us doing that, she might have just applied for a role, got to maybe a 10% bump, and it's like, well, it's 10%, it's more than I was making before. But now, knowing how much she actually needed, how much additional income she needed, that 10% wasn't something that she would be satisfied with.
Yeah.
And I'm using 10% just as an example,
Yeah.
but it's just to say that her knowing made her able to make more informed decisions, and it helped her accomplish more of what she wanted financially.
I love that story. It's so powerful. The other thing that it does, apart from just the knowing and taking that step back and having objective information, is it empowers you in a different way. So where
Yes.
before it was sort of, there's that potential to kind of allow things to happen, getting information and taking your own goal-based mindset to it, because it's now become a goal, puts you into a proactive mode where
Exactly.
before
You're in control.
yes, and then you realize it's more of, okay, no, this is what I want. And as soon as you know what you want, then you're able to go for it. That's
Right.
really powerful. That's really powerful. And just looking at it from that perspective, you drill down the numbers, but it's essentially like just about everything else in life. Once you know, then you can
Yes.
go for what you know. I love that story so
Absolutely.
much.
And Idara, like, I mean, you talk about confidence all the time, right? And confidence in the workplace. You know that there's a different energy on you when,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, you're offered a 10% bump, and you're like, I guess I should ask for more because I should ask for more. And you're like, well, could you give me 15%? And you're just kind of like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a different energy compared to when you're like, all right, I know I have the skills. This is a great 10% offer, but what I really need is 20%.
Yep.
And know that that's what you want. And you're
Mm-hmm.
asking for it with that energy of like, this is
That
what I want.
less won't
And if
cut
I
it.
can't get that, let me go look for where I can.
Exactly.
Right. And that energy, like people might think like, maybe they'll like reject me because of actually that energy is what works. Like when they know that you're confident and you come with that
Yep.
confidence, like it really does work.
It's very powerful. I suppose it's also knowing your why. This is sort of like the financial version of it. You know why you're looking for minimum. This is not sustainable. This is simply not going to be enough for
Yes.
my life. This is
Right.
why. So yes, all of
Right.
these things, who I am, what I am, but that certainty, and now you're also less likely to negotiate anything that's less than, because you know what, it's like,
Exactly.
okay, well, thank you very much for this conversation. It simply won't do, so I will be on my way.
Exactly. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like if it were something vague where you were like, I think I need more money versus you're certain, you're like, I know the things I want to accomplish. And to support those things, I need this amount of income, and you know that that's your why. And your why isn't because, oh, you just want to hoard money. It's because you want to send your kids to school. You want to retire at a reasonable age.
Yeah,
You want to
yeah,
have some nice things. Like we should all have nice things,
yeah.
like let's not make it seem like it's dirty. We should all
Right,
have nice
right,
things,
right.
right? So once you know that, and you're able to kind of like own it, it shows in your energy and your
And then there's
confidence.
that potential for shift. First of all, here's where I am. What do I want? And now, equipped with this is what I want, it starts to drive all of what
Oh gosh,
you do.
yes.
You've now
Yes. And before you
evaluated
know it,
everything.
things start to fall in place, you know?
That's been my experience, and it's been my observation as well. It's not magic. It sometimes feels like magic and sometimes
Right.
looks like magic. And there's something to be said for serendipity. Oh, I just happened to come across this person.
Mm,
But I will say that the knowing, the being informed, the being certain, the being ready, in essence,
yes.
positions you so well to be able to take advantage and move to that next step.
Yes. And Idara, I might butcher this saying, but I think it's something like luck is where preparation meets opportunity or something like that. So when people say someone's lucky, you're
Mm-hmm.
not able to be lucky if you're not prepared, if you don't recognize what an opportunity is, right? And so that thing about being ready and knowing, it's so important. It really is,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how you see opportunities, and you can, even if you can't jump on them at that time, you can continue to be prepared for them. You can continue getting ready for them. So I think it is such an important thing, that knowing
Yes.
piece.
They say luck favors the prepared.
There we go.
I like that one too. So I want to kind of bring us around to wrap up the conversation. And don't be surprised if I reach out to you again so that we can tease out another aspect, because we're kind of keeping it broad, but we can definitely talk a lot more about finances. There's something to be said for feeling empowered. There's something liberating about being empowered with finances, no matter where you're starting from. And so it's kind of summarizing what we've talked about. There's the starting point, where I am and what I want, getting the information that you need so that you know what it is that you have, and then continuing to build on what you have. And part of the strategy for getting there is first looking at what you have, writing it down, planning it, and sharing it, if depending on who you have around you, for that accountability component, and then continuing to keep track of it.
Yes. So anyone who, and I know, Ida, you've heard me say this so many times, so you're probably sick and tired of hearing it, right? But
Never
anyone
that.
who who talks to me, like, I'm really going to be sharing that 65% number with
Mm-hmm.
them. You know, if you want to increase the likelihood of achieving your goals, right? Write it, plan it, track it, and share it.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, when I work with clients, I help them create personalized financial roadmaps.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm working in personal finance and helping people with their finances, that's why the roadmap focuses on finances. But really, you can use it for anything, right? And the way I've structured the roadmap is I start with an I want statement, because that's powerful. You know, if you're not strongly feeling something, you're not going to pursue it, right? So I start with an I want statement. What is it that you want? You know, we start there. Then all the things that you mentioned, where are you now? Then the next statement is I will. That's your commitment statement. I will do XYZ steps. This is where I, as a financial coach, help them come up with, hey, what are the right actions for you to take? But let's say you were using this roadmap to do something in your career. You know, you could get the help of a mentor or a career coach, someone who could help you get what those relevant actions are for your I will statement, right? And then the last piece is the I have, because we want to end our roadmap with the affirmation that we have accomplished that goal. You know, and part of being able to say that confidently is having your success measures, having a way to like track your progress. You know, and unfortunately, people make the mistake of having that goal and using just that one thing to track. But that's not very encouraging, right? Like you want all these other small success measures.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like even picking up the phone to talk to your accountability partner. You did that, which means you're keeping your goal in focus, and that's helping. That's a success measure, right? So those are the kind of like ways that a roadmap like really will help you. A written plan, 65% increase in your success, and you know, sharing it with an accountability partner.
I really like your emphasis on recognizing what you've accomplished. There's something to be said for taking note of those. They might feel small, but they're wins nonetheless. Acknowledging
Absolutely.
and capturing where you have successfully checked off or taken care of something, celebrating the
Yes.
wins, that just goes such a long way.
It really does. And in building your confidence, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of like know that I used to be somewhat of an all or nothing person.
Has to be
All right.
big. Did we do it all?
Right.
Right.
Right. I have to like do it all. Like if I haven't accomplished every single thing that I had set out to accomplish, then it was a failure. And slowly I've changed that mindset. Like every little bit that you do along the way, you know, sending in that credit card payment, that's $2 off your minimum payment or $2 above your minimum, whatever it is, that's a win. Yes, you still have that debt you're working down on, but still, you're taking all those steps. Those are all wins along the way, you know. And so, being able to track those, celebrate it, share it with your accountability partner, those are all the things that like would really, really help people build confidence, feel like they're in control, right, and then get them to achieving their goals.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Ramat. Even in having this conversation, we've talked about this a lot, and still I keep picking up on new things. I love that definition of, not so much definition as teasing out what the I have means. You know, that I have is recognizing what has been done. I want, I will, I have.
Yes.
Okay, so let me use the opportunity to wrap up our conversation. Like I said, I anticipate us having an opportunity to come back and talk more about this. But thanks for taking the time to have this conversation today. And I look forward to another one in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. You know, I can talk about this all day.
I know you can. You can. So until next time, then. So that was our conversation with Ramat Oyetunji. Loved all of that, all she had to say, especially about the I want, I will, I have. So look for a link to download that template in the description below, as well as links to her website and other information that you can find out about Ramat and her company, the FI Woman. See you in the next conversation.